everybody, and welcome to today's webinar called Poverty Perspectives. My name is Liz Weaver, and I'm the co-CEO of the Tamarack Institute. It's my pleasure, along with my colleague Paul Bourne, to host and introduce this second webinar in our Board of Directors webinar series. Before we get started, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land that we are meeting on today as Indigenous land. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this land. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. And I'd like to let you know that I'm coming to you from the city of Hamilton. My office is located on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and the Between the Lakes Purchase of 1792. And we welcome you, those of you that are joining us on the webinar, to identify which land you're joining us from. So you can do that, and we'll invite you to do that in the chat box. So it's really my pleasure to introduce our board members who are joining us today, and to give you a little bit of background about their experiences, their considerable experiences. So I'm going to first introduce Kate Gunn. For the past 15 years, Kate and her teams have supported and led a variety of complex community change initiatives in Edmonton. These include the Community Safety Task Force that led to the creation of Reach Edmonton, Edmonton's signature winter city strategy, Edmonton's Women's Initiative, and Recover Edmonton, Edmonton's Urban Wellness Program. From 2014 to 2016, she and her team completed the community leadership, or supported the community leadership initiative of Mayor Don Iveson's task force to end poverty in Edmonton in the development of a bold strategy and a 5-year roadmap. This work formed the foundation for a community-driven collective called End Poverty Edmonton, and profiled the pivotal role cities play in convening and working collaboratively with communities, advancing innovative approaches to social issues, and sparking a shift in both attitudes and systems change. And now I'm going to introduce you to Kerry. Kerry Nolan grew up along the Alaska Highway in some of the smallest communities in the Yukon. She graduated and went to a college in Whitehorse, where she pursued an education in social work. Kerry's schooling was put on hold following the birth of her 2 boys. Over the next 20 years, her life took several twists and turns as she learned and grew through a number of life experiences. Her struggles with addictions, poverty, and homelessness helped to mold her into the woman that she is today. For the last 2 years, Kerry has had the opportunity through the Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition and the Tamarack Institute to take her own story across Canada. She looks forward to sharing her professional experience and lived experience at a national level and in the services of advancing social justice and social change. So welcome to both of you, Kate and Kerry. So you both have to turn your sound up. So
Thanks,
Kate.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody.
So welcome. So we began with giving the listeners on the call a little bit of background information about each of you. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your current work and how you're currently involved in the community? Kate, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Liz and Paul, and greetings to participants online today. It's an honor to join you for this conversation. I'm joining you today, by the way, from Edmonton. So I'm pleased to be and fortunate to be speaking to you from Treaty 6 territory here in Alberta. And very much like Kerry, my colleague on the board who will be speaking next, we're both looking out our window and seeing land covered in snow with sunshine and pretty cold temperatures. So we may be a few of the only cities across Canada at the moment that are enjoying this winter weather. But yeah, I'm very pleased to be here today. I think, Liz, thanks for the intro. I've just had an amazing opportunity over the last 17 years to work with the City of Edmonton on a variety of initiatives. And what really struck me was that I really felt in that role that I had the best of both worlds. I worked for the city, the municipality, which I believe, in the experience that I've seen over 17 years, I feel that cities are where the action is and where solutions can come from. They are the order of government closest to people. But at the same time, working with the city, I had the opportunity to work on all those initiatives that really engaged citizens as leaders in the work. And to me, that was really important. I just retired last fall. And so I was thrilled to, at that time, be invited by Paul and Liz to join the board, the National Board of Tamarack. So that's one thing that I'm currently doing. And I feel that it's such a great opportunity to work not only with the amazing leaders on the board and the staff of Tamarack, but to continue to be involved with this organization that is leading the way on collective impact in Canada and frankly, much further afield, abroad and around the world. A second thing, it's sort of a three-step, sort of three-part answer. Last fall, or no, I guess it was just this spring, you know, this year of 2020 sometimes feels like it's several years, but earlier this spring, I was invited by a colleague of mine, Ben Weinlich, who is a leader in social innovation in this country, to consider joining the board of the Skills Society. And this is an organization that supports people with developmental disabilities in Edmonton to live full and thriving lives, to contribute to their community. So it's a great opportunity for me to learn and about developmental disabilities and to contribute in that way. Something that when I worked with the city, I often didn't get involved personally as a board member. So these two opportunities to me are really ground me and continue to ground me both in the community of Edmonton, but then nationally through Tamarack, which is really exciting. And the third and final thing that I just got involved with this summer, so fairly recently, is a project around food security with newcomers and immigrants to our community with an organization in our community called the Multicultural Health Brokers, a co-op. And so I've found that very, very exciting as well. And I can talk more about that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Kerry, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and your work?
Thanks, Kate. Well, I'm sitting here on this panel today as somebody with lived experience of poverty, homelessness, and the work that I do with Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition, the organization that I've worked for about 3.5 years now. For the last 2.5 years, I've been telling my story across Canada to be able to help support change within government and other organizations that work with vulnerable population and the people that are living on the streets or are food insecure. And what I do when I sit at these tables is I have the ability to bring story, like truth story of my own to these tables. And it's very unique in the sense that many people, if you've not experienced these things that some of our vulnerable population have, you don't understand. For many years, people have been trying to support these people, make changes for these people, but not asking them what their thoughts are or what they need. So I like to think that that's where I come in, being able to tell my story in a way, as my co-facilitator would say, of our voices influencing change, tell it from a place, from a scar and not an open wound. It's still very painful and very emotional when I tell my stories. However, I'm able to tell them knowing that in some way it will make change, maybe for a participant that's listening or for officials and power positions that can make these changes happen. So with Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition, we started a Voices Influencing Change program, which is, I guess, my main job there, along with many other things. But I co-facilitate and coordinate this group where we bring people with lived experience, homelessness, food insecurity, poverty, social injustice, like many different aspects. But these people want to know that their stories will help make change. So we just give them some tools, support, a safe place to be able to unpack their story, put it back together, honoring everything that's happened to them, and be able to tell their story. So it's very proud for me to be able to do that with everything I've come through, and now to be able to support others to do the same. It makes for a great day for me to work every day. As well as I sit on Food Network Yukon, which is just a roundtable group of people who, well, not so much roundtable anymore with COVID connection and stuff, but who just talk about food security that's going on, whether it's from farmers growing the food or from agricultural, finding different monies to help these people grow the food. Like, it's just many, many ways for us to join together and talk about common causes of issues of supporting everybody in our community. Recently, we've found that there's more food insecurity within our community and within the Yukon as a whole than we had thought prior to COVID. So these are many things that we're working on now. And I'm just kind of the connection between the people living on the street and the organizations that are supporting them. I've been there. I know these people. We're family. So I'm just that person that's easy to talk to, where others may not understand quite as well. In a nutshell.
Paul, why don't we send it over to you to lead us in the next question? It's really interesting to me, though, to hear how both of you are so connected into your communities in such really important ways. Kate, and there's overlap, right? So Kate's working on a food initiative, and Kerry, you're also interested in a food initiative. So it's really interesting to see the connections around the table. So over to you, Paul.
Well, Liz, it's important. Kerry and Kate have both been very active in cities reducing poverty. And that's Tamarack's initiative, which, we have about 83 nodes representing about 350 municipalities in Canada now that have pulled together poverty reduction strategies. And this is a pretty exciting time. And just to give a little bit of context to this webinar, in the 20 years that Tamarack has been working on reducing poverty, we've grown this network of cities from zero to what it is today. So it's a pretty impressive network. They've been big players in national poverty reduction work. And just before COVID, Canada announced its lowest level of poverty in the history of Canada. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of poverty left, but what it means is that we are reducing poverty. And I know that so often, we think to ourselves, what's going on out there? Why can't we make progress on poverty reduction? Or we get the sense that there's more homeless people than there ever was, so we think that poverty is getting worse. But the reality is, in the last 5 years, there are 1 million less people living in poverty than there were 5 years ago. So it's pretty amazing. And the whole journey of this work, and I know Tamarack is going to be hosting a big conference in May called The End of Poverty. And I know both Kerry and Kate will be very active in that, in helping us to work together, as will their communities. I know that COVID has really thrown a wrench into poverty reduction work, and we will get through it. I guarantee you that. But as we get through it, let's make sure we don't go back to just alleviating poverty. As important as that is, making the lives of the poor better, I can tell you one thing: there is not one person living in poverty who wants better poverty. What they want is out of poverty. And it's exciting about all the things that are happening in Canada today that are working toward that. And so proud of our network, so proud of the work that Kerry and Kate have done in moving this work forward. Just another quick introduction. Kerry also was very active working with Allison Homer, who is the team lead for Cities Reducing Poverty, to write an amazing guide on lived and living experience, and bringing that knowledge and that wisdom and that experience into the end poverty discussion. So I'm hoping that Duncan, you might be able to put that link into the chat box so that people can go there and read it. And thanks again, Kerry, for all your work in putting that together. And so while I'm talking to you, Kerry, what are some of the pressing poverty issues that are happening in Whitehorse, and what are you guys doing about it?
There's many to talk about, Paul, but we're trying to do as much as we can. Like I was saying earlier, I think one of the main poverty issues is what we found is the food insecurity. And a little twist to this is we had been asked at Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition to sit on a panel of food insecurity with somebody with lived experience of food insecurity at, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, at the Maple Leaf Food Symposium. So myself, as being the coordinator of Voices Influencing Change, was looking to find somebody who would want to participate in that. And my boss had said, well, Kerry, what about you? And the more, I didn't think I was ever food insecure, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the story of my food insecurity was one that's not talked about, was one that it's not that you don't have food on your table, it's that you're worried about other issues. You're worried about a house over your head, you're worried about violence in the home, you're worried about, substance use, and those kind of take over. If there's food there, that's great. So, it was just one thing that I didn't, I never thought I had food insecurity issues. I realized quite quickly that I did. So I was the one who chose to sit on that panel. From there, they actually did a vignette on my story of being food insecure, which was, great, because again, I think that's a story that many people don't hear. Single mothers, single fathers are worried about other things that are pressing on a daily basis, and the food is something that comes secondary. Which is wrong, which is completely wrong in our territory. In Canada, there's enough food to feed everybody healthily. So that's one thing that we have still found is this food insecurity, and that I'm passionate about too, is because it's not reached as much as we thought we were doing before COVID. We found since then that there's gaps in the system, there's gaps in our food bank system, the handing out of food in different places where people will feel safe and secure, being able to, first of all, ask for help and ask to get that support, and then feeling comfortable getting it, which is huge for anybody with any kind of trauma issues. So we've got together, many of us NGO community have come together with the food bank, and we're now reaching out to communities. Prior to COVID, and I think I'm going into the second question a little more, but prior to COVID, our food bank was not reaching the communities, where we have many of them in the Yukon. And so now we've kind of focused in on making sure our communities get their food as well, their hampers. We've got food situations with the Jordan's Principle coming out of our CYFN community, getting food out there as well to the children, food for schools. So there was all these organizations that just weren't pulling together. We didn't quite know what everybody else was doing. Services were being duplicated, and holes, gaps were being missed. So we've started to come together a lot more, sitting at these round tables and having conversations about what each organization is doing to be able to make sure we reach everybody that's needed. As well, we found out there's a lot of situations that happened with communications. There's many people who don't have means of communication, which, you know, keeps them in the dark with a lot of things that are going on, keeps people unable to talk to their doctors or their social workers or get supports. And that's something I think we found can be easily supported by having Wi-Fi hotspots, other places around the community and around our city. As well, we're on a Housing First initiative, which is great. There was one of our units were opened, a Yukon housing unit was opened this past year. And again, COVID put a huge strain on this because it was supposed to be programmed oriented and support oriented. However, with COVID, we weren't able to do the programming that we had all hoped we would. So that's kind of been put on hold for a while as well. But we have heard that this is definitely helping a lot of our vulnerable population. Once you're home, once you're housed, you feel better about yourself, which gives you the opportunity to have more room to deal with your traumas, deal with your issues, your addiction issues, deal with other issues that in your life that are holding you in a spot that isn't the best that you can be, I guess. So we want to be able to do that, and Housing First just seemed to have been the way that we all kind of connected with and realized, and myself from a lived experience point of view, I know how beneficial that is when you have a house to call your own, and then once you know you have a safe place to sleep at night, you can worry about other things and deal with other things that are going on. So we're trying, Paul. We're doing the best that we can.
That's awesome. Awesome answer. Over to you, Liz.
I had myself on mute again. My question is for Kate. And, you know, Kate, you and I probably go back a number of years since, you know, early in my time at Tamarack. And I've watched you kind of lead many things in Edmonton, and you shared a little bit about your different kinds of involvement. What would you say are some of the most pressing challenges or some of the issues that are currently facing, you know, the city of Edmonton? And I know you're, for anyone who follows you on Twitter, we know you're a big Edmonton person who really advocates for Edmonton. So.
Great. Thanks for the question, Liz. Yeah, I guess I am a booster of Edmonton for sure. Certainly no longer working with the city, but very interested in it, and especially in the impact of COVID on municipalities. You've been following that a lot. I've been following the CAN urbanism work and the platforms that cities across the country, as well as Tamarack, have been really contributing to, because I think, as much as I said earlier, that municipalities are really in the vanguard of change and have been in the vanguard of change across our country for the last 10 years. You know, from my perspective, I think it's going to be increasingly challenging for cities with the impacts of COVID, both the financial, mostly the fiscal, the financial impacts. I think municipalities are really struggling with the depleted resources, stretched resources, fewer staff. And I think that's going to have like a really big impact on the partners that the municipalities work with, because so much of the great leading edge work that we have done in our community, and I think across Canada and around the world, happens when cities and municipalities work with citizens and with other organizations. And in this situation with COVID, not only the challenges of connecting and building community virtually, but more importantly, or just equally importantly, the challenges of tight resources. I'm hopeful that the commitment will still be there amongst cities to those bold changes, to those big plans. The city of Edmonton, for example, this summer did come out with its Reimagine plan, in which the key message was, we don't intend as a result of COVID to go back to basics. You know, we really want to commit to the vision that we have here in Edmonton of the new city plan, and this vision for what this city can be as it grows to 2 million people over the next 20 or 30 years, how it can be diverse and vibrant and equitable. And it's a very inspiring plan. And then COVID has hit just as that plan sort of has come towards City Council and to the community to be confirmed. So the intention certainly, I believe on Edmonton's part, is to keep that commitment to those big and bold ideas that are really important to the quality of life that we know is really important to citizens. So I think that the whole financial challenge is one. I hear and see a lot about the challenges of affordable housing in cities across this country. So that's affordable housing, especially in our big cities, there's not enough of it. Permanent supportive housing, there's not the funds to build and to support that across the country. I know the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, of which our Mayor Don Iveson, I think, is the chair, is often talking about the challenges that municipalities have because they don't have the access to the resources and the policy levers. The responsibilities for some of these big issues formally lies with other orders of government. Yet often it falls to the level or the order of government closest to citizens to try to come up with solutions. And where I think the best solutions do lie from the community and from that municipal level. So I think although some funding has come through the federal government and for rapid housing for some of these units of permanent supportive housing, there's a long way to go. It's a game changer in the End Poverty Edmonton strategy, and it's probably a game changer in every strategy that there is to end poverty is looking to housing. Not saying that it is the solution, but it is a critical one, as Kerry has mentioned, with Housing First. I think the city has also been struggling certainly this summer, and as we talk about winter, we're going into winter. We happen to have the dubious honor of being amongst one of the many hotspots for COVID in the country at the moment here in Edmonton. And, you know, I think there have been challenges with the issues of temporary housing for people who are homeless. We have 2,000 people homeless in Edmonton now. The numbers are increasing every night. 600 people often sleep outside in the city. And as the temperatures drop to -40, that's a big challenge. So back in the early COVID era of the spring, the Expo Center was opened to provide 24/7 shelter. It closed down in July, which then gave way to the creation by a number of organizations here in the heart of downtown Edmonton of a temporary encampment that grew to 170 tents of 300 people who were there until just last week. It was really interesting and challenging to see this large group forming a community with elders and ceremony and a safe space for people to gather. I think it really provides some insights into temporary kinds of shelters and how they need to be grounded in Indigenous worldview, in harm reduction, and in principles of building a community. But we now have our convention center downtown has now opened for October through next March, I think, right through the winter here in Edmonton. That tends to last about 6 months or more. And already I think it's feeling the stress and strain of the numbers of people that are there. And it can accommodate 300 to 400 people. So I think housing is such a big one. And the only last one I'd mention is to echo Kerry, that food insecurity is a big issue. It has been in Edmonton for quite some time. I think the Edmonton Food Bank is experiencing its greatest volume of demand and need in 39 years since it was formed. And so in the work that I'm doing on the Persimmon Project, working with newcomer families, we're looking at surfacing those stories of strength and resilience amongst newcomer and immigrant families in order to try to spark some ideas around some innovative approaches that might be explored further to try to address food insecurity or food security and justice in a more positive light. And, you know, I'm very thrilled to be working with Yvonne Chu, who is the leader of the Multicultural Health Brokers, because she's really got a powerful vision about the importance, very much as Kerry spoke, about grounding our understanding of the importance and the power of food and the potential to find solutions within community, by surfacing those stories and those narratives, those strengths, and the opportunities that people on the ground can provide. So I think the fiscal situation, the affordable housing is an ongoing one, which really needs big picture changes and systems changes and resources, and then food security. Those are three that are top of mind, but there are many in Edmonton, Liz.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, both of you, Kate and Kerry. So Paul, over to you for the next question.
Well, I'm finding it all very interesting, listening to people. I'm also spending a fair bit of time in the chat box and in the Q&A box, answering some really great questions from people, and really excited to just hear people's interest in this topic. Just give me a sense. I know that both Kerry and Kate have talked about this, and I know Kate, you talked about it from the perspective of homelessness, which is just like fascinating to me. You know, that we've got this temporary increase in homelessness due to COVID, and it's you know, I know that your mayor in particular is so committed to ending homelessness. And he said that a number of times and talks about kind of how it's like, I mean, he doesn't use these words, but I always interpret it as these words as how stupid can we get to have homelessness in a country as incredible as Canada and in a city as incredible as Edmonton. You know, what I consider it to be, when you're thinking it's a hot spot for COVID, I call it a hot spot for creative and innovative thinking and an amazing leadership that goes on there. It's one that sets the stage for the rest of the country, and especially on the topic of poverty. And Mayor Iveson I'm just a huge fan of his and his thinking, as I am of many people there.
Paul?
Yeah.
I might just add that one thing I've heard Mayor Iveson say numerous times around affordable housing is that it is the best medicine to address poverty is housing. You're right. Certainly we have a 10-year plan to end homelessness in Edmonton, and we've certainly come to the 10-year point. The work continues though to go, but we have very, very strong leadership from community organizations such as Homeward Trust and the Boyle Street Community Services and the Bissell Center and many different housing organizations that are working more and more closely, I think, in a more coordinated way. And so, yeah, that leadership is so important at the political level, but it's really important at the community level as well.
Yeah, and lots to talk about there. And you know, obviously for me, housing, you've heard this from me before, it's only one small part of ending homelessness. So it's a much bigger job than housing. But starting with you, Kerry, like what changes have you seen in your communities in responding to COVID-19? And did any new opportunities emerge or any gaps show up in Whitehorse?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Paul. I think I mentioned some of them, but I really want to put a shout out there to all the NGOs and the non-government organizations, because I think what COVID did actually highlight, like more than anything, is that we are an essential service. When governments shut their doors to it was on us that had to reinvent ways on still supporting these people. Yes, thank you, government, for giving us the money to do that. However, it was very difficult, and I just recently there was a question that I answered in the question answer chat there. Just recently finished Poverty and Homelessness Action Week. And this year's theme was systemic racism. We found at Anti-Poverty Coalition, some of the other organizations and tables that I'm at, that COVID had enhanced the the separate who don't. And seeing that really opened our eyes. I do want to say, I think Paul mentioned intermediate Kate, I'm not sure, but we have seen that COVID has shown us that there's this huge diversity between incomes or your place in the community. However, I think now that people are starting to recognize it a bit more, this is where we need to take the opportunity to make those changes, because we have an ear, we have the government's ear, we have people watching and seeing what's going on in our communities, that now we just need to make change and keep that going. As you had said, Paul, you know, it's not going to end after COVID. Let's continue. Let's keep on making this work. And like I had mentioned, COVID had brought about a lot more noticeable gaps that we found with food insecurity. I think that was the huge one. The communication I'd mentioned already. So yeah, I think I mentioned them all already, but I'd answered a question before it was asked. But yeah, I do want to, like, more than anything, put a shout out and a thank you to all the NGOs, to Tamarack Institute for bringing us all together to be able to have these conversations, to move forward and to use this opportunity in the best way we can. Thanks
so much, Kerry. Back to you, Liz.
So I think I'm going to jump to our final question, and just in recognition of time and maybe getting to some of the questions from the folks that are joining us today. So this is a question for both of you, and maybe we'll start with Kate first and then go to you, Kerry. But what is your hope for, or your wish for, ending poverty in Canada? This is something that, you know, Tamarack has a vision around, but love to hear from you, both as board members, but also people that are deeply involved in community. What's your hope in this area, or your wish? So Kate.
Sure, good question, Liz. These are short questions, but big ones. I have a couple of things. I was thinking a little bit more in terms of Edmonton, Liz, in terms of ending poverty, but I think, in fact, my answer really would speak to communities across this country as well. And one of the very specific hopes that I'd like to see happen in Edmonton, that I think would contribute to ending poverty, is the creation of an Indigenous culture and wellness center in Edmonton. It's certainly not the silver bullet that would solve all issues of poverty, but it was no coincidence that that was the #1 action in our End Poverty Edmonton roadmap. It's something that's led by the Indigenous Culture and Wellness Steering Committee now, and it's a big dream. The work started in 2018. I mean, the work most recently started on a call for something like a gathering place that would be a gathering place for Indigenous Edmontonians, that would provide insight into culture, opportunity to connect, services. And it's just a very inspiring vision for this Indigenous Culture and Wellness Center. And it seemed rather daunting when we began the work on it. And I have to say that, you know, the Indigenous Edmontonians that we heard from and that we listened to in the first year of our environmental scan said the time has come. You know, we have talked about something like this for a long time. We need a place that brings us together. Maybe it's a series of places. It's hard to say. A building sometimes doesn't strike you as something that could be a solution, but the importance of it, I think it would be just so significant. And I know that End Poverty Edmonton is working now with the chiefs of Treaty 6, with people in this community and with different partners to try to move this idea forward that the work began on a year or two ago. But as I said, it's been a long-standing hope and vision. And I think it would contribute to shifting attitudes, to building a sense of, a strong sense of the importance of these Indigenous cultures and the leadership of Indigenous people in our community to shape what Edmonton is today. So to me, that's an important one, although it may seem very specific. And my other one is on the other side. It's a very bigger picture hope to end poverty. And in fact, it's not really about poverty per se. My hope is that in this province of Alberta, that this time next year, when we have a provincial election, that the faces of the people who are elected around those city council tables across this province from north to south and east to west will reflect the communities that they serve. And so I really feel that it's so important to see more women running for elected office, more diverse women with diverse experiences and backgrounds running, because we know that if with diversity comes strength, comes better decision making, and I think we'll see even stronger progress to end poverty. It's not an easy task. Ending poverty is not for the faint of heart. It takes many generations. It takes a lot of work. It can't be done by one organization, one order of government. It's got to be collective. And I think that if we can make that change and that shift in our elected officials to have that richness of perspective, the kind of thing that Kerry talked about as well, I just think we'll have better decisions and even stronger leadership than we've been fortunate to have, many of us, for years now. So that's my big picture hope for ending poverty.
In many ways, it's about bringing different voices to the table in both of your examples. And I think that that's been pretty pivotal, as Paul said, to the Vibrant Community Cities Reducing Poverty work, and also to your work, Kerry, as Kate mentioned. So Kerry, what's your hope? What's your wish?
Well, I think mine's a bit broader than Kate's, however, along the same route. So it's great to hear that. It's great to hear that other people are thinking the same way I am. And I've gotten this a lot too from all the conversations that we had during Poverty and Homelessness Action Week. And that was on the racism, of course. And everybody had talked about how if there's more equality, if there wasn't so much racism and stigma and stuff around, we would be able to have these conversations on a equal playing field, if you want to put it that way. Whereas, you know, everybody's listened to, everybody has their say. We can celebrate different cultures. We can celebrate experiences and not holding people down. I think a lot of people that live in poverty are living homeless. A lot of it has to do with some kind of racism or stigma, or you know, that's been placed on them for whatever reason. You know, whatever might have happened to them in their life. People move forward. People can move on and get healthy. And if I was to say something that would help end poverty in Canada, it would be we all need to be equal. We all need to support one another, encourage one another, celebrate one another. That way we all have a common goal, and that's to end poverty. So we can all just be the best that we can be. I think that's where a lot of work around the universal income comes in as well. I think would definitely help. I know that there's a big push for that in a lot of the organizations and a lot of the boards that I sit on. If we could push for that, there you take out one hoop that people would have to jump through, not having as much as somebody else. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kerry. Those I think are really wise words. Paul, anything that you want to add in here, because you also do a lot of thinking about ending poverty in Canada. So anything that you want to add into Kate and
Yeah, I do.
vision?
Thanks, Liz. There's also a great question sitting up in our Q&A that I want to get to, but just on this topic of ending poverty, I think Kerry and Kate's visions, I would align with them very quickly. But you know, the one thing for me that has been pressing for a number of years now is working poverty. And I know that COVID again has shed a shadow on working poverty, because we just want to get people back to work. But you know, the reality is, if you work, you should not be poor. I think every Canadian would agree to that. And yet over half of the people living in poverty work. They either work part-time, they work seasonally, And the fact is that the vast majority of people living in poverty move in and out of poverty. They work, they're out of poverty, then they're back in poverty, or, and just even going to work, they lose all the benefits that they get from being on the dole, so it all sucks. Like, that whole process sucks. And there's no way that we're ever going to be able to get Kerry's vision of the basic income implemented if we don't deal with working poverty. So we've got to get it done, right? You work, you should not be poor. Paul Martin saved a ton of money to the UI system by changing the fundamental way that people access it. So all the seasonal workers who used to be able to get UI can't get it. And he did that because he felt the UI system was bankrupting itself. We've got to correct that somehow, right? Because we need to make work at a cornerstone of ending poverty. And every person living in poverty that I know wants to work if they can. But they also want to make it worthwhile. So we need all kinds of hybrid methods, all kinds of creativity that allow people to work and to make work. Because work is something that feeds your soul, not only your belly and puts a roof over your head. So I really want that for Canadians. I want to eliminate working poverty. And there's a whole bunch of things we have to do that. And I think that needs to be our top priority. We have done an amazing job already on ending seniors' poverty, where we implemented the Ontario basic income, right? Old age security, and then we added the guaranteed income supplement. So we've almost eliminated seniors' poverty. Now we've got the Canada Child Benefit for children. A massive drop in child poverty across the country, right? And we just need to keep increasing those. Now I'm being told that there was an announcement in the House that they're going to do a guaranteed income supplement for people with disabilities. So we have a real chance of eliminating disability poverty. Let's work on working poverty. And let's figure that out. It'll be good for the economy, and it will be good for people living in poverty. One quick question, Liz, that I think hasn't really come up today, and Elaine has thrown this out a few different ways. Elaine Labarge, I'm terrible at names, Elaine, so sorry. Great questions. I apologize, I can't pronounce your last name very well. How do we address that this nation relies on colonial charity models to deal with, in the meantime, solutions for poverty, while also developing structural solutions to eradicate colonial class inequality and inequality in Canada? It's just a kind of a pressing idea today, is this whole notion of that which has created inequality and what keeps inequality present today. Thanks, Elaine, for that question. Kate, Liz, I know you've been doing a lot of thinking here too, and Kerry.
I might jump in, Paul. That's a great question. Just a couple of things around that. The work to, thanks, Elaine, the work to end poverty in Edmonton, really, I know when our task force was first struck, really grounded its work in looking at poverty through a different lens, looking at poverty through a human rights lens. And one of the things we talked about a lot was that while charity is good, justice is better. And so certainly that helps shape a big focus of the End Poverty Edmonton strategy on human rights, on equity, on anti-racism. And so I think that's important. I also see, I'm very new really to this field of food security in the work that we're doing now. But I've seen amazing work, as Kerry has said, by not-for-profits stepping up in this past 6 months to either hugely expand their exploding need of their communities for food, or if they weren't even involved in food, if they were a sports organization or an organization that provided services of another kind to the community, they have taken on the role of providing emergency food service. And the governments have certainly supported with funding. this emergency relief. But more and more, I think over this past few months, at least, we've seen those organizations on the ground realizing that it goes beyond food, that it goes beyond charity, goes beyond hampers, that there is more to that. And that's how our project, the Persimmon Project, is just a small part of that picture, saying, while charity and emergency food services are important, we need to look at things like culturally relevant food and dignity, and move beyond the charitable model, or move alongside the charitable model. There's maybe space for both. But I think that is a shift that may be coming as a result of the experiences of COVID. Thanks.
Liz, I think we need, I'm getting signals that we need to wrap up.
Yeah, maybe what we could do is just have Kerry respond really quickly and then throw it over to you, Duncan. So Kerry, how about you? What do you think about this notion of moving away from charity and to human rights, social justice perspective?
Oh, I believe in that 100%. And I think a lot of the ways that we can move into that too, and I know Tamarack has done a lot of work, the work that Allison and I did on engaging people with lived experience. I think we need to have a lot more voices from the people who we're supporting, the people who are living in poverty. We need to hear from them how to support them the best that we can. And as Kate was saying, is how we hear every day. I mean, government is throwing all this money at us now during COVID. We need to take a hold of that and support the people with where they need the support. We can, like, as Kate was mentioning too, we can give people hampers. However, that's a charity. We're giving them something we think they need. If they were to come to us and say, hey, I could use some dish soap or some dog food or something that they need, and not just, what we figure that they need, I think would bring everybody up. Self-esteems would go up, feeling good about yourself, feeling good about where you are at, wherever that may be in your life, I think is the best place to start. And we can do that as NGOs, as organizations that work with these people hand in hand, face to face. I think we need to take this opportunity to do that.
Great, thanks so much, Kerry. So Duncan, I think we're coming to the end of our time and we have just some wrap-up announcements. But before we do that, want to thank Kerry and Kate and Paul for joining this call today, because I almost feel like we've had a bit of a four-way conversation on the call today. So thank you so much, though, Kerry and Kate, for your leadership both in Whitehorse and in Edmonton, but also for your leadership on the board of directors at Tamarack. We are better off for the wisdom and contributions that you make. So thank you very much on behalf of Paul and I for those contributions.
Thank you. So, thanks, Liz.
You're welcome. So over to you, Duncan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz, and I'll echo those comments. I really appreciated the discussion we had today. I just have a few quick closing announcements. I'll also mention that we're going to be sending a post-webinar email with a full recording of today's call, a copy of the slides, and a collection of links and resources. And I'll be sending some of those questions we didn't get to the group to get some more links and resources for you as well. The first thing we're going to mention is our new online course, Foundations of Community Engagement. If you join us in Foundations of Community Engagement, you'll be able to learn at your own pace and follow the process of planning and executing a community engagement activity from beginning to end. The next is a virtual workshop, Collective Impact 3.0, Designing Movement for Change. And this is with Liz Weaver and Sylvia Chu, and all about the impacts and the benefit of having a movement building lens in your community change initiative. And the last is at the Asset Building Community Workshop. You can join Cormac Russell, who will lead us through a learning journey to learn how you can develop citizen and youth-centered community development approaches, gain tools for precipitating citizen and youth-led action, and to build a framework for place-based community building. We have 2 dates for this. The December 3rd is focused on youth-serving organizations. So we really encourage you to check out all of these links at tamarackcommunity.ca. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today, and I hope you have a wonderful week.